Hello guys and welcome to my new video, and today we're going to talk about one of the most important aspects when it comes to elections: enthusiasm. Okay, and we're going to analyze some graphics now here of some enthusiasm metrics about the 2024 election and how that impacted the final results. And sometimes people and politicians and voters underestimate the importance of enthusiasm. For example, this year, the enthusiasm in the Democratic Party was to vote against Trump, was to vote against the Trump administration, was to send a message to Washington. That was the enthusiasm of the Democratic voters this time. And that helped Mikey Sherrill and Abigail Spanberger getting a great result in November, which could also help in about 2 weeks from now in the December 2nd special election in Tennessee, the Democrats getting a competitive result. And enthusiasm, I would argue, is the most important metric when it comes to elections. Okay, doesn't matter if you're leading in the polls if your voters don't show up in election day, and they need to show up if they think your candidate and your people are actually doing something that will help them in the future. So you would argue that people voted for Trump because he was sending a message that he will make lives better for people. If he did that this year or not, that's another point for another video, and that's another point for you also to discuss. It's not a point for me here to be talking about that. But if Trump fails to deliver on many of his promises, this could mean less enthusiasm for the midterms next year. And that could actually be happening. So this was how enthusiastic are Democrats and Republicans about voting in the 2024 election, okay? So as you can see here, before Kamala was the Democratic nominee and was the geriatric Biden, I'm sorry to use that word, but it's just the way it is, the way it was, and Trump is also a geriatric, but Biden was in a worse situation. Also, he's older than Trump, but he was in a worse situation. You saw that in the June debate, and all of those people around the Democratic Party, like Nancy Pelosi and all of those, asking for Biden to step out and to give way for Kamala to be the nominee. And that's what happened. So before Kamala was a nominee, you got a lot of enthusiasm in the Trump's candidacy, when compared to the Biden's one, because people were not as great as they were to vote for Biden as they were for vote for Trump in that area. Okay, people were not excited because it's normal. I mean, you got although Biden was an incumbent, Biden did not have the energetic, the enthusiastic way to motivate people to vote, and that is a very important thing. Okay. And then we got a huge surprise for the Democrats when a huge jump for the Democrats when Kamala became the nominee. So we got the Democrats leading, and then it all went up. The latest polls in September 2024, the Republicans are actually leading. Okay, and here, as you can see here, Trump voters were more energetic than in 2023 because, of course, Trump is much bigger in terms of the size of the enthusiasm rather than the Republican Party alone. But as you can see here, when you compare to Biden to Harris got a huge jump. Why? And this is because when Harris got into the scene, even though she was a terrible candidate, I'm not talking in terms of policy. I'm talking in terms of motivating voters and turning out voters. Okay, I don't care about a policy here, to be honest. She was a terrible candidate in that way, okay? And Trump was much better, effectively, efficiently, in terms of turning out voters, in terms of all the machine, the turnout machine behind the Republican Party, which is Trump. And Kamala did not have that, okay? And the rallies and all that stuff, it was not as good as Trump's were, But as you can see here, we got a very up in terms of the enthusiasm, a very jump in the enthusiasm when Kamala got into the scene, because Biden was not seen as energetic, and then Kamala said with a new message, look, it's going to give freedom and all of the message and all of the supports like Taylor Swift, and that helps in some way. It helps the Democrats in this case getting voters, okay? Because Taylor Swift is a well-known figure, and especially during the youth people, and the youth people is normally the ones who doesn't turn out in as big numbers as the elderly ones. That is true, and that's also it was helpful for Kamala, even though it was not enough. I think that was one of the points that helped Kamala a bit, okay? And as you can see here as well, when you compare as well, are enthusiastic about your candidate, we got a huge jump in the Democratic Party. So you can see that many people argue that candidates don't matter sometimes, and charismatic, you having a lot of charisma doesn't matter. What matters is the policy. I need to be honest with you. Policy doesn't matter. I don't mean in terms of this being great, but I do mean in terms of the people. People don't care about policy. People care about promises. And in this case, as the climate was very bad for the incumbent party, which were the Democrats, this was actually great for Biden, which was the incumbent, to step in and let Kamala do the job, even though she lost the same way. She did a better job than Biden, because if it were for Biden, I mean, this would be a landslide, even though it was already in terms of the Electoral College speaking, but it would be a much bigger landslide, even in the popular vote. Trump would probably win by 10 or so. So the point is, enthusiasm is the most important. You want to be voting for the Democratic or the Republican nominee. Of course, Trump was the last three, but in terms of the Democratic Party for 2028, you need to learn a lesson. You don't need to choose the best candidate, policy speaking, or the one that has the most knowledge about policy, because of course the candidate or the president is not the one who is responsible 100% for policy. He has people around it, or she has people around it, so that doesn't matter. What matters is, when you're choosing, you need to choose someone that is charismatic. It doesn't mean it needs to be all the way, or it needs to be a very moderate candidate, because Trump was not moderate, and Trump is not moderate, but Trump is able to energize his base, and his base is enough to win if the other base is not energized enough. You saw that in 2020. Trump was able to energize his base, but Biden did a better job. That's why he lost. Trump lost. And that is the main point. You can choose a guy like Gavin Newsom. You probably don't agree with a lot of what he's saying, but probably he's better in terms of charisma, and that's better for the general election, because he needs to win. Firstly, if you want to have your policies in the White House, you need to have your party to win. And probably I would say a guy like João Moreira, of course he cannot run for president, but a guy like him can energize the Democratic base a lot in New York. You saw that. Even though Andrew Cuomo was a very establishment Democratic candidate in that way. And we're going to have a video about João Moreira and if he is the future of the Democratic Party. The point is, first thing you need to get a win in the general election is charisma, okay? You need to have enthusiasm, you need to have a candidate that is able to to have his base enthusiastic, okay? Otherwise, you're gone. Otherwise, you're going to lose. That's what happened in Kamala. I'm not saying this, but probably there are some people that says, okay, Kamala has better policies, but she's not able to energize me to vote, okay? So I'm not going to vote. That's what many people thought. Of course, they were not voting for Trump, but they were not voting at all, okay? And that happened in Detroit, for example. Detroit, Michigan, a very important city for the Democrats, where we got a huge drop in turnout. People, and especially Arab Americans, because of the Latino, not Latino, of the Israel-Gaza, Hamas war, all of that, and they did not vote because they didn't feel that neither Kamala nor Trump were the best choices. So they either skipped the presidential line or voted for Jill Stein, which were not, of course, relevant. This is the most important, because Kamala were not able to energize their votes. Okay, they would energize those voters, saying that, okay, maybe, and I'm not saying I agree with this, but maybe Biden did a lot of mistakes in the Israel-Hamas war, so we need to make something different, and I propose this and that and that. So that was the point. Kamala lost a lot. And guys, I think this was a video, but this is just a very important metric. People sometimes underestimate enthusiasm, the most important metric in elections, okay? And this is the video. Hope you have liked the video. Don't forget to subscribe and leave your like, and we'll see you on the next. Thank you.